The sun's rays streamed through the taxi window as we finally entered Tigard. I peered at the unfamiliar streets, trying to imagine how my son lived here. 3 years is no joke. Caroline and I had always wanted to visit Ethan after he moved, but my wife's illness had thwarted all our plans. "We're here, sir," announced the driver, stopping in front of a two-story red brick house. I paid the fare, adding a generous tip. 74 is an age when you no longer count small change. My pension as a consulting geologist was enough for a comfortable life, and the investments I had made in my youth provided a steady income. After unloading my old-fashioned suitcase, I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the neat little house with white shutters. Caroline and I had once dreamed of something similar. She would have appreciated the flower beds in front of the entrance. "Dad!" Ethan's voice snapped me out of my reverie. "You're finally here. Come on, let's go inside." My son ran out onto the porch. He looked older than his 39 years, wrinkles around his eyes, receding hairline at his temples. He looked like me at the same age, except I wasn't so thin back then. "Ethan," I said, giving him a big hug. "I'm so glad to see you." "Me too, Dad. Come on, Abby's waiting inside." Abigail. I'd only seen her twice, at their wedding 10 years ago, and briefly at Caroline's funeral. A dry handshake, formal condolences. That was the extent of our interaction. My sister-in-law was 37, but she looked 30, a slender blonde with perfect posture and a cold smile. The hallway smelled of cinnamon and apples. Abigail was probably baking something, a nice gesture, but for some reason I doubted its sincerity. "Hello, Eugene." Abigail came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome." Her voice sounded friendly, but her eyes remained wary. She stepped back slightly when I moved to hug her, so I settled for a handshake. "Thank you, Abigail. Sorry for the intrusion. I hope I'm not disrupting your routine too much." "What do you mean, intrusion?" She smiled tensely. "Family is family." Ethan fussed over my suitcase, clearly trying to ease the tension. "Dad, we've prepared a guest room for you on the second floor. It has a great view of the park." "I'm sure you're tired from your trip," Abigail interjected. "Why don't you go upstairs and rest, and I'll call you when dinner's ready." I heard a tone in her voice that was familiar from working with younger colleagues. That's how they talk to older people they want to get rid of as quickly as possible. I held back a sigh. "Sure, a little rest wouldn't hurt." Following my son up the stairs, I entered a small but cozy room. A single bed, a bedside table, an old chest of drawers, and a desk by the window. Nothing superfluous, as if the room served more as a backdrop than a living space. "Make yourself comfortable, Dad," Ethan said, placing his suitcase by the bed. "The bathroom is down the hall, first door on the right." "Thanks, son." There was an awkward pause. I waited for Ethan to sit down so we could talk. About his work, my life after Caroline's death. Anything. But he shifted from foot to foot, glancing at the door. "You must have things to do," I asked, hiding my disappointment. "Yes, I need to finish a report for tomorrow's meeting," he replied with relief. "I'm about to get a promotion, you know." "Of course, go ahead. We'll have time to talk later." Left alone, I slowly sorted through my things. The year without Caroline had been the worst of my life. 52 years together, and suddenly there was emptiness. Our house in Portland, once full of light and laughter, had turned into a museum of memories. Every object reminded me of her. The porcelain figurines she collected, the books with dog-eared pages, her old rocking chair. The doctors said that with pancreatic cancer, the chances were slim. Caroline fought for 8 months. I was there until her last breath. When it was over, the days merged into an endless gray mass. I tried to keep myself busy, volunteering at the local geological museum, consulting for former colleagues, even taking gardening classes. But the loneliness wouldn't go away. The letter to Ethan asking him to visit was written in a moment of weakness. I didn't expect him to agree so quickly. Maybe I even heard relief in my son's voice. Perhaps he missed me too. I walked over to the window. Down below in the gazebo in the backyard, I noticed Abigail. She was talking on the phone, gesturing emotionally. Even from a distance, I could hear her raised voice. When she turned abruptly toward the house, I instinctively stepped back from the window. Silly. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but something about her posture, the tension in her shoulders, alarmed me. An hour later, I was called to dinner. The table was set impeccably. A snow-white tablecloth, crystal glasses, silver cutlery. Too formal for a family dinner. "It looks delicious," I praised sincerely, sitting down in the seat indicated. "Abigail is a master at setting the table," Ethan said proudly, helping his wife arrange the dishes. "I just love it when everything looks beautiful," she replied. "Unfortunately, my culinary talents are not so impressive. Just a simple casserole and salad." "At my age, you appreciate simple food," I smiled. Caroline was also a minimalist in the kitchen. When I mentioned his wife's name, I noticed Ethan tense up and Abigail grimace slightly. "How are you doing, Dad?" his son asked cautiously as he poured wine. "Day by day," I replied honestly. "Sometimes I wake up and forget for a second that she's gone." I reached for her side of the bed. "That must be so hard," Abigail interrupted. "By the way, Ethan, don't forget to call Chloe about the magazine photo shoot." The abrupt change of subject hit harder than I expected, but I kept quiet, focusing on my food. "Right, thanks." Ethan readily picked up on the new topic. "Dad, the local magazine is doing an article on promising professionals. They've included me in the list. There will be an interview and a photo shoot." "Congratulations. I always knew you would go far." "It's all thanks to hard work," Abigail interjected, glancing quickly at me. "Ethan has worked his way up from the bottom." I heard the implication in her words, unlike his father, who seemed to have had everything handed to him on a silver platter. If she only knew the truth about my career. "Tell us about your job, Ethan," I asked, ignoring my sister-in-law's jab. "You're with an investment company, right?" "An analytical one, Dad. Ocean Futures." "I head the rare earth metals market forecasting department." I almost choked. Ocean Futures was the company I had invested a significant portion of my savings in 15 years ago. Thanks to my geological experience and contacts, that investment had paid off handsomely. Of course, Ethan didn't know about this. I always acted through intermediaries and proxies. "Sounds impressive," was all I said. "Ethan is on the verge of a promotion," Abigail announced proudly. "He will soon become deputy director." I knew more about this promotion than they could have imagined. I was the one who hinted to the chairman of the board that my son deserved a promotion, not because he was my son, but because his analytical reports were truly brilliant. "Wonderful. I hope I can stay here long enough to celebrate the occasion." Abigail tensed but quickly regained her composure. "How long do you plan to stay, Eugene?" "A few weeks if I'm not imposing." "Don't be silly," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Stay as long as you need. To be honest, our life is rather monotonous. I'm afraid you'll get bored." "At my age, you appreciate peace and monotony," I replied. After dinner, Ethan excused himself and went to work in his home office. I offered to help with the dishes, but Abigail firmly refused. "You are a guest, Eugene. Relax. I can turn on the TV in the living room for you." "Thank you, but I think I'll go for a walk. The weather's beautiful." "As you wish. Just don't get lost," she said with a note of condescension in her voice, as if I were out of my mind and could get lost 3 blocks from home. Stepping out into the fresh air, I took a deep breath. Tigard was a pretty town, green and well kept. No wonder Ethan had chosen to live here. I walked slowly through the streets, looking at the houses and parks. Caroline loved walks like this. She would comment on the architecture, admire the gardens, and chat with the locals. Without her, even the sunniest day seemed dull. Returning home an hour later, I noticed a neighbor, an elderly lady, trimming her rose bushes. She waved at me cheerfully. "You must be Ethan's father," she said when I approached. "I'm Virginia Holt. I live next door." "Eugene Hampton," I said, shaking her dry hand. "Nice to meet you. How do you like it here in Tigard?" "It's a wonderful town. Quiet, green, and a little gossip," she winked, "but only among us retirees." We laughed, and for the first time that day, I felt at ease. "How is your daughter-in-law?" Virginia asked unexpectedly. Abigail is always so businesslike. I caught the hidden meaning, but didn't pursue the subject. "She's a wonderful hostess." "Oh yes," nodded my neighbor. "Their house is always immaculate, like something out of a magazine. You know, Eugene, if you get bored, come over for tea. I bake excellent blueberry muffins." "I'll definitely take you up on that," I said sincerely. When I returned home, Abigail was talking on the phone in the living room. When she saw me, she quickly ended the conversation. How was your walk? She asked, without showing much interest. It was nice. I met your neighbor, Virginia. Ah, the old gossip. Abigail rolled her eyes. Don't take what she says seriously. She seemed nice to me. They all seem nice, Abigail muttered. Ethan is still working. Dinner is at 7. Feel free to use the TV or books. The rest of the day passed in silence. I leafed through an old detective novel I found in the bookcase, but my thoughts kept returning to the strange tension in the house. Something was wrong. The Ethan I remembered was always open and warm. Now he seemed to be avoiding me. Conversation was difficult at dinner. Ethan talked about work, but in general terms, without details. Abigail made occasional comments, mostly about household chores and plans for the weekend. We're having dinner with Ethan's colleagues on Sunday, she said. I'm afraid you won't find it interesting, Eugene. Don't worry about me, I smiled. I can entertain myself. Maybe I'll visit Virginia. Abigail grimaced but said nothing. After dinner, Ethan suggested a game of chess, the only moment of the day when I saw a glimpse of my former son. We played in the living room while Abigail watched some reality show, deliberately turning up the volume. Forgive her, Ethan said quietly as I made my next move. She's just worried about her upcoming promotion. It's important to her. I understand, I nodded, although I didn't really understand such blatant disrespect. She's a good person, Dad. She's just a little obsessed with success. I looked at my son. His eyes showed uncertainty, as if he was trying to convince himself rather than me. The main thing is that you're happy, I said, making another move. Check. Before going to sleep, I looked for a long time at the photo of Caroline that I always carry in my wallet. It seems our boy has changed, I whispered, or am I missing something important? Falling asleep in a strange bed, accompanied by the unfamiliar sounds of a large house, I thought about tomorrow. Something told me that my visit would not be as smooth as I had hoped. The week at Ethan's house dragged on painfully slowly. I tried to be an inconspicuous guest. I got up early, had tea and toast for breakfast, then went for long walks around Tigard. I spent my evenings reading or watching TV while Ethan worked in his office, and Abigail went about her business. Every morning I hoped that today the ice would break, that my son would invite me to lunch or at least have a heart-to-heart talk, that Abigail would soften and stop looking at me as if I were an unexpected problem. But with each passing day, the tension only grew. By Thursday, I noticed that Abigail had started to emphasize the word week in her conversations. You've been with us for a whole week now, she said at breakfast. How does it feel? Quite comfortable, thank you. I tried not to notice the subtext. Of course, she smiled subtly. I'm just worried you're bored. A week in our quiet town and how much longer to go? Ethan, who was leafing through the newspaper, coughed. Abby, Dad can stay as long as he wants. Of course, dear, she said sweetly, but her gaze was icy. I'm just concerned about Eugene's comfort. By Friday, Abigail had moved on to more obvious hints. At dinner, she casually remarked, Eugene, you must miss your home in Portland? After all your things are there. Your memories. Sometimes, I admitted, but I enjoy spending time with you. We enjoy it too, she replied mechanically, but we don't want to take up too much of your time. You must be a busy man. I stifled a laugh. In Abigail's eyes, a 74-year-old retiree could not possibly be a busy man. She sincerely believed that she was doing me a favor by allowing me to stay in their home. On Saturday morning, I decided to go to Virginia Holt's for the promised blueberry muffins. My neighbor greeted me with genuine joy. Eugene, I thought you had forgotten my invitation. Her house was cozy and a little old-fashioned. Antique furniture, collections of porcelain figurines, lush houseplants, just like Caroline and mine. What a wonderful house, I praised sincerely. Thank you. I've lived here for 32 years, Virginia poured tea, since I was widowed. My husband left me insurance money, so I sold our big house and bought this one. I've never regretted it. We got talking. Virginia turned out to be a former history teacher with a sharp mind and a great sense of humor. She knew everything about Tigard and its inhabitants. Has your daughter-in-law Abigail always been so pompous? She asked, pouring me some tea. Or is she just trying to impress you? I think she has a difficult personality. Personality? Virginia snorted. Darling, she has no personality. She has ambition and nothing else. You're being too harsh. I'm observant, she replied. I've seen how she treats your son. He's like he's walking through a minefield, always looking over his shoulder, afraid to say the wrong thing. Her words struck a chord with me. Was Ethan really afraid of his wife? Maybe they're just going through a rough patch. Maybe. Virginia didn't look convinced. You know, I saw Abigail at a local cafe with some man. They were sitting very close together and talking, intimately. Are you implying infidelity? I frowned. I'm not implying anything, she shrugged. Just sharing my observations. By the way, this man works for the same company as your son. I felt uncomfortable. Gossip has never been my thing. Virginia, I appreciate your concern, but I'd rather not discuss my son's personal life. Of course, she nodded, but her eyes said, you'll regret not listening. Returning to Ethan's house after lunch, I heard loud voices coming from the slightly open living room window. Abigail and Ethan were arguing. I knew it wasn't right to eavesdrop, but my feet slowed down on their own. I stopped under a spreading maple tree, pretending to examine the leaves. How much longer is he going to hang around here? Abigail's voice rang with irritation. A week, Ethan. A whole week with your father under the same roof. He's my father, Abby. What am I supposed to do? Kick him out? Why not? Tell him we need space. Tell him you're going through a tough time at work. Come up with something. I can't do that to him, Ethan's voice sounded tired. He just lost his mother. A year ago, Ethan. A year. Not yesterday. How long can we put up with this useless old man? He's just wasting our resources and time. I froze, struck by the cruelty of her words. Useless old man. So that's how she sees me. He's not useless, Ethan objected, but so uncertainly that it was almost more offensive than silence. And what resources is he wasting? He hardly eats anything. It's not about food, Abigail snapped. It's about my nerves, my comfort. I can't relax in my own house. I always have to be polite, always smile at this. Enough, Abby. No, you're going to listen to me. We're saving up for a new car. We were planning a vacation in August. And now what? We're stuck at home with your old man because it's awkward to leave him. And when we get back, he'll still be here. And in September, too. And at Christmas. He won't stay until Christmas. Ethan's voice sounded uncertain. Are you sure? He's deliberately playing on your pity. Oh, I'm so lonely. Oh, your mother died. And you fall for it. Like always. Abigail, please. Please what? I'm married to a wimp who can't say enough to his own father. Who can't stand up for our family. For our future. I heard the sound of breaking glass. Abigail must have thrown something. I won't put up with this, Ethan. Her voice became quieter but threatening. It's him or me. Make up your mind. You have until the photo shoot on Sunday. I quickly moved away from the window, feeling my cheeks burning with shame and anger. Could my own son not find a single word in my defense? Was he really so under this woman's thumb? Not wanting to go back home right away, I decided to take a walk. Tigard was a small town, and soon I was approaching the business center. There were no skyscrapers here, just a few modern 5- or 6-story buildings. One of them caught my attention, a glass tower with the Ocean Futures logo. I stopped in front of it. My son worked behind these walls. Behind these walls was the office of a company that I actually owned through a network of trusts and shell companies. Initially, it was just a good investment. 15 years ago, before Ethan moved to Tigard, Ocean Futures was a small analytical firm specializing in metal market forecasts. Thanks to my experience in geology, I saw the potential. I invested money and became a shadow investor. Over time, my stake grew to a controlling interest, although I was not officially listed anywhere. Everything was done through proxies and legal structures. When Ethan graduated from college with a degree in economics, I considered offering him a position at the company. But then I decided to let him achieve everything on his own. I simply hinted to my manager that my son was looking for a job in analytics. Ethan went through all the interviews and initially worked in junior positions. To be fair, he really was talented. His analytical reports were highly valued. I never intervened directly, until recently. A month ago, I learned that a position for a deputy director was opening up at the company. Once again, I couldn't help myself. I called the chairman of the board of directors, my old friend Paul Willis. I hinted that Ethan would be an excellent candidate. Paul agreed. Standing in front of the building, I suddenly felt the urge to go inside. Maybe I could catch a glimpse of my son's office, or even meet Paul. I entered the spacious lobby and headed for the reception desk, where a young woman with bright red hair was typing something on a computer. "Good afternoon, how can I help you?" she smiled. "Good afternoon. I'd like to meet with Paul Willis if possible." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he can spare a minute for me. My name is Eugene Hampton." Hearing my name, the girl suddenly straightened up. "Mr. Hampton." She lowered her voice. "Eugene Hampton?" I nodded, surprised by her reaction. "One moment, sir," she said, quickly dialing an internal number. "Mr. Willis? Sorry to bother you, but Mr. Hampton is here." "Yes, Eugene Hampton." "All right, sir." She hung up and looked at me with new respect. "Mr. Willis is coming down personally to meet you." Less than a minute later, Paul emerged from the elevator, a large man with a graying beard and a good-natured face. We hadn't seen each other in person for several years, communicating mainly by phone. "Eugene," he said, opening his arms. "What a surprise. Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" "It was a spur-of-the-moment decision," I replied, shaking his hand. "I'm visiting my son." "Ethan is an excellent specialist," Paul said, lowering his voice. "The board of directors has approved his candidacy for the position of deputy. We'll make the announcement next week." "Glad to hear it," I nodded. "Does he know?" "Not yet, but he has his suspicions. Let's go to my office and have some coffee." We went up to the top floor. Paul's office was spacious, with panoramic windows overlooking the city. "How are you doing?" he asked as we settled into our chairs with cups of coffee. "How's Portland?" "Quiet," I shrugged. "After Carolyn's death, the house feels empty." "My condolences, my friend," Paul shook his head. "She was an amazing woman." We paused. "So Ethan is getting a promotion?" I changed the subject. "Does he deserve it?" "Absolutely," Paul replied confidently. "His predictions on rare earth metals changed the company's strategy. We've saved millions thanks to his recommendations." "That's good to hear," I smiled, feeling fatherly pride. "Although," Paul suddenly frowned, "there is something that bothers me." "What is it?" "His wife," he sighed. "She's too aggressive in promoting his interests. She calls directors, invites them to dinners, insists on meetings. You know, in business, that can work against him." I wasn't surprised. Such behavior was entirely consistent with Abigail's image. "She's ambitious," I remarked neutrally. "That's putting it mildly," Paul shook his head. "At the last corporate party, she told the CFO straight out that her husband deserved a bigger office. It was awkward." We talked for about another hour. Paul told me about the latest market trends, and I shared news from the geological industry. When it was time to leave, he walked me to the elevator. "I hope you'll stay in Tigard," he said. "Maybe we can have dinner next week? With Ethan, of course." "We'll see," I replied evasively. After overhearing that conversation, I was no longer sure my visit would last long. When I went down to the lobby, I was surprised to see Abigail standing at the front desk, talking animatedly with a tall, dark-haired man. They were standing very close, almost touching each other. I froze, not wanting to be noticed. I remembered Virginia's words about possible infidelity. Abigail put her hand on the man's shoulder, leaned closer, and whispered something in his ear. He laughed and nodded. To avoid her gaze, I quickly made my way to the exit, trying to stay behind the columns. Once outside, I took a deep breath. What was that? Innocent flirting or something more? And should I tell Ethan? When I returned to my son's house, I found that no one was there. There was a note on the kitchen table. "We're having dinner with friends. Food is in the fridge. Don't wait up." I reheated the lasagna she had left and sat down to eat in the empty kitchen. Abigail's words echoed in my head. "Useless old man. Just wasting our resources." If only she knew who I really was. If only she knew that her husband's future at the company, their financial well-being, their future, everything depended on the useless old man. I took out my phone and called my lawyer in Portland. "Thomas, this is Eugene Hampton. I need you to prepare some documents." Sunday morning was unusually busy. I woke up to the sounds coming from downstairs, the noise of a vacuum cleaner, the clatter of dishes, voices. I glanced at the clock and was surprised. It was only 6:30. Who gets up so early on a day off? Going down to the kitchen, I saw Abigail in a silk robe, with curlers in her hair. She was standing at the stove, vigorously stirring something in a pot while talking on the phone, which she held between her ear and shoulder. Nalna, and be sure to bring those white roses I mentioned. Not red, not pink, white, and the ribbons should match. She noticed me and nodded without interrupting her conversation. Yes, by 10. Everything must be perfect. I poured myself some coffee and sat down at the table, trying not to disturb her morning frenzy. I could hear the sound of water somewhere upstairs. Ethan was probably taking a shower. "Good morning," I said when Abigail finished her conversation. "You're early today." "Today is an important day," she said with a slight irritation in her voice, as if I should have known that. "A photo shoot for a magazine. Everything has to be perfect." "I remember," I nodded. "Ethan mentioned it. And it's not just a photo shoot," she ignored my words. "It's the first step toward Ethan being recognized as a leading expert. After this article, his name will be on the lips of everyone important in the industry." "Sounds impressive." I took a sip of coffee. "How can I help?" Abigail froze for a second, as if my question had caught her off guard. Then she smiled tensely. "Thanks, but everything's under control. Just try not to get in the way." Those words hurt me, but I kept quiet. After all, today was their day. "Of course," I replied calmly. "I can go for a walk while you're busy." "That would be helpful," Abigail said with obvious relief. "The photographer and journalist will arrive at 11. The decorators and florists will be here earlier. It's going to be hectic." Ethan entered the kitchen, buttoning his shirt as he walked. "Good morning, Dad." He looked tense but tried to smile. "Have you heard about our photo shoot?" "Yes, Abigail was just telling me." I set down my cup. "Sounds like an important event." "That's an understatement." Ethan poured himself some coffee. "They selected only 5 specialists from the entire region. It's a tremendous honor." "And a tremendous responsibility," Abigail interjected, turning off the stove. "Ethan, did you remember to pick up your suit from the dry cleaners?" "I picked it up yesterday." He turned to me. "Dad, I'm sorry we're so busy today. Maybe we can meet up tonight and grab dinner somewhere?" "Honey," Abigail interjected, "after the photo shoot, we have dinner with the magazine editor, remember?" "Oh, right." Ethan looked embarrassed. "It completely slipped my mind. Sorry, Dad. Maybe tomorrow?" "Don't worry," I waved my hand. "I have things to do. By the way, I promised Virginia I'd help her move some furniture. It was a lie, but I wanted to give them some space and not feel like a burden." Abigail beamed. "Wonderful. Then we won't keep you." After breakfast, I did go to Virginia's, even though we hadn't agreed on anything. Fortunately, my neighbor was home and greeted me with open arms. "Eugene, what a pleasant surprise. Come in. I was just about to have some tea." I explained the situation, and Virginia nodded understandingly. "Ah, that photo shoot. Abigail has been talking about it for the last 2 weeks. At the last homeowners meeting, she talked everyone's ears off about it. We sat on her porch watching cars pull up to Ethan's house one after another. First a minibus with a flower shop logo, then a furniture van, followed by stylists. "It's a real circus," Virginia chuckled, pouring me some tea. "And all for a couple of photos in a magazine that maybe 100 people read." "It's important to them." I tried to defend my son and daughter-in-law, even though I thought it was all a bit over the top. "It's important to her," Virginia corrected me. "Only to her." By 10:30, Ethan's house had turned into a real anthill. People came and went, carrying boxes, vases of flowers, and lighting equipment. Finally, the photographer arrived, a young man with a trendy beard and thick-rimmed glasses. He was followed by a middle-aged woman with a notebook, apparently a journalist. "Let's go inside, Virginia suddenly suggested. "It's getting too hot." I followed her, even though it was a fairly cool day. When we were in the living room, she leaned over and whispered conspiratorially, "You know, Eugene, I think you should be at this photo shoot." "Why?" I asked in surprise. "They clearly don't want me getting in the way." "That's exactly why," Virginia winked. "You're Ethan's father. You have a right to be in the family photo." "It's not really a family photo," I objected. "It's for Ethan's work." "Nonsense. They're doing a stage photo shoot for a magazine. Successful analyst with his family and all that. I saw last year's issue. There was a lawyer with his wife, kids, and even a dog. I thought about it. Maybe she was right. Maybe my presence was appropriate after all. I was Ethan's father after all. And ironically, the actual owner of the company for which this whole photo shoot is being done. Maybe, I said uncertainly. Not maybe, definitely, Virginia nodded firmly. Go. The worst that can happen is they'll politely ask you not to participate. But I'm willing to bet my porcelain collection that the photographer will be happy to add the venerable father of the family to the frame. Her enthusiasm was contagious. I decided to take a chance. When I returned to Ethan's house around 11:30, I saw that preparations were in full swing. The front door was open, so I just walked in. The living room was transformed beyond recognition. The coffee table had been removed, the sofa had been moved to the fireplace, and vases of white roses were everywhere. Professional lighting equipment created a warm, homey atmosphere. Ethan sat in a chair while a stylist fixed his hair. Abigail stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing her outfit, an elegant beige dress that accentuated her figure. The photographer adjusted his camera, and the journalist talked to Ethan, writing something down in her notebook. No one noticed my arrival, and I stood awkwardly in the doorway. Finally, Ethan looked up and saw me. His face showed surprise, which quickly turned to concern. "Dad?" He pushed the stylist's hand away. "I thought you were at Virginia's." All heads turned in my direction. I stepped into the room, "but I thought you might need my help." "Help?" Abigail spun around sharply. Her eyes betrayed a poorly concealed panic. "What kind of help, Eugene?" "Well, I don't know," I shrugged, feeling increasingly uncomfortable under the crossfire of glances. "Maybe with the photo shoot?" Abigail made a strange sound, something between a laugh and a sob. "A photo shoot? You?" She looked at the photographer as if seeking support. "I'm afraid that's not possible. We have everything carefully planned." "Actually," the photographer interjected, "I don't mind adding the father to the shot. It could create an interesting dynamic. Generational continuity, experience, and youth." "No," Abigail cut him off. "That's not the concept we discussed. This is about young professionals, about the future." "Of course, it's your decision." The photographer shrugged and went back to setting up the camera. I felt incredibly awkward. Why did I listen to Virginia? Why did I come? "Sorry, Abby," Ethan said, getting up from his chair. "Maybe we could take a few pictures with Dad. Not for the magazine, just for us." Abigail's face contorted as if she had eaten something sour. "Ethan, every minute is scheduled. After the main photo shoot, there will be an interview. Then we need to change for dinner." "Just a couple of pictures," Ethan insisted, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward my son. At least he wasn't completely under his wife's thumb. Abigail pressed her lips into a thin line, then forced a smile. "Fine, if there's time. Now, Eugene, perhaps you could wait in the kitchen? We need to finish getting ready." I nodded and headed for the living room door, feeling the sympathetic glances of the photographer and journalist on me. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at the table, listening to the voices from the living room. The photographer was giving instructions. The journalist was asking questions. Ethan and Abigail were answering. Everything sounded professional and smooth. I was almost dozing off when I heard footsteps in the hallway. "Ethan!" Abigail's voice sounded muffled but clear. "Are you crazy? What other photos with your father?" "I told you, not for the magazine," Ethan replied. "Just for us." "And how will that look?" Abigail hissed. "Us in evening gowns and him in his worn-out cardigan? Us at the peak of our careers and him a retired old man? They photograph successful people. Not—" "He's my father, Abby." "So what? This is a professional photo shoot, not a family album. We've been planning this for 2 months. Everything has to be perfect." I slowly got up from the table. Maybe it really would be better to leave. Wait somewhere until all this fuss was over. At that moment, the kitchen door swung open and Abigail walked in. Seeing me standing at the table, she stopped short. "Eugene," her voice sounded strained, "we're almost done. I think you really should go back to Virginia. There's too much commotion here." Ethan appeared behind her, his face expressing embarrassment and guilt. "Dad, I'm sorry about this," he said, spreading his arms. "Maybe you should come back later, when everyone's gone." I looked at my son. Couldn't he see what was happening? Didn't he understand how his wife was manipulating him, pushing him away from his own father? You know, I said slowly, I think I should be part of this photo shoot. What? Abigail stared at me as if I were crazy. I'm your father, Ethan, I continued, ignoring Abigail. And I have the right to be there for you during the important moments in your life. Ethan hesitated, looking back and forth between me and his wife. Dad, of course you have the right, but now is not the best time. When will be the best time? I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, which I had been holding back all week. When your wife decides that I am worthy of being part of your life. Eugene, Abigail stepped forward, her voice turning icy. You're crossing the line. What boundaries, Abigail? I met her gaze. Between family and strangers? Or between those you consider worthy of being around you and those you despise? Dad, please. Ethan put his hand on my shoulder. Let's not do this now. When then? I shook off his hand. When you stop letting her decide how you treat your own father? Silence fell over the living room. Apparently, everyone present could hear our voices. What's going on? The photographer appeared in the doorway. Is everything okay? Yes, Abigail replied quickly, forcing a smile. Just a little family misunderstanding. We'll be right back. No misunderstanding. I stepped toward the photographer. I just wanted to join the photo shoot, but it seems there's no place for me here. Are you Ethan's father? The photographer asked. Honestly, I think it would be a great idea. We have a concept for a family photo. No! Abigail suddenly raised her voice. I already said no. An awkward silence hung in the kitchen. The photographer looked stunned. Ethan looked embarrassed. And Abigail looked furious. Okay, I said calmly, feeling a strange sense of relief. Now everything was out in the open. I understand. Sorry to bother you. I turned to leave, but Abigail suddenly blocked my way. No, you don't understand. Her voice trembled with anger. You never understand anything. You come here, invade our lives, act like everyone owes you something. Abby, Ethan said warningly. No, let him listen. She turned to her husband. I've been putting up with this for a whole week. I smiled, I cooked, I was polite. And him. He comes on the most important day and tries to ruin everything. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I objected. I just wanted to be a part of... Be part of what? Abigail interrupted. Our life, our success. You have nothing to do with it. You're just a lonely old man clinging to your son because no one else wants you. Abigail, Ethan exclaimed. Stop it. But she couldn't stop. Years of pent-up irritation burst out. I don't want to see a beggar in our family photo, she shouted, pointing her finger at me. I don't want people to think we're supporting a homeless person. I want them to see a successful couple, not a pathetic pensioner in a worn-out sweater. The kitchen fell silent. I heard someone in the living room gasp, probably the journalist or stylist. The photographer looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. I looked at Ethan. My son stood with his eyes downcast, unable to meet my gaze. His cheeks burned with shame, but he remained silent. He didn't defend me. He didn't argue with his wife. I understand, I said quietly. I completely understand. I walked past Abigail, past the photographer, through the living room, where everyone stood frozen, watching the drama unfold. No one said a word as I took my jacket from the coat rack and headed for the door. Ethan caught up with me at the threshold. Dad, wait, he said quietly, almost in a whisper. She didn't mean it like that. She's just nervous about the photo shoot. No, Ethan, I shook my head. That's exactly what she meant. And you know what's sad? You're letting her treat me this way. Dad, now's not the best time to talk, I repeated his words. You have an important day. I don't want to ruin it. Where are you going? His voice sounded alarmed, but not enough to really stop me. I'll find a hotel, I shrugged. I'm flying to Portland tomorrow. But we haven't even talked properly. Do you want to? I looked him in the eyes. Do you really want to? Ethan hesitated, and that moment of hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Dad, let's finish this photo shoot. I'll come by tonight, and we'll talk. Don't worry, I zipped up my jacket. You have dinner with the editor, remember? I don't want to get in the way. He looked like he wanted to say something, but Abigail's voice rang out from the porch. Ethan, the photographer is waiting. My son gave me one last guilty look and disappeared into the house. I walked slowly down the street without looking back. The weather had turned bad. The sky was overcast with clouds and the wind had picked up. Rain was coming, but I didn't care. 2 blocks from Ethan's house, I found a small hotel. Nothing fancy, but clean and tidy. I booked a room for one night and went upstairs feeling incredibly tired. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I took out my phone and booked a plane ticket to Portland for the next morning. Then I called a taxi to take me to the airport tomorrow. After that, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling and listening to the rain drumming on the window. The events of the day replayed in my head over and over again. A poor old man. That's how they see me. I, a man who has built a successful career, invested my money wisely, and secured a comfortable retirement for myself and a future for my son, am a poor old man. The irony was that it was thanks to me, the poor old man, that Ethan would get a promotion. It was my investments that helped the company where he worked become successful, but neither he nor his wife knew that, and now they probably never will. I thought about Abigail's words, Ethan's silence, my own loneliness. I had come here hoping to find a family, to fill the void left by Caroline's death. Instead, I had received definitive confirmation that my only son had chosen a different life, a life in which I had no place. The rain intensified, turning into a downpour. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I closed my eyes, feeling tears running down my cheeks, the first since I buried Carolyn. That night, in a small hotel in Tigard, I finally realized that my relationship with my son was irretrievably damaged. The morning in the hotel room was damp. I woke up with the first rays of the sun, even though I had only slept for a few hours. The night had been restless. I would fall into a heavy slumber, then jump up at the slightest noise outside the window. Abigail's words echoed in my head. Poor old man. Pathetic pensioner. After ordering coffee to my room, I sat by the window and watched Tigard wake up. People were rushing to work. School children with backpacks were trudging to the bus stop. Young mothers were walking their dogs. Ordinary life in an ordinary city. And I felt like a ghost watching a world to which I no longer belonged. The phone was silent. No call, no message from Ethan. However, I didn't expect it. Last night, when the pain had subsided a little, I realized that I wasn't surprised by his silence. My son always took the path of least resistance. As a child, this manifested itself in his unwillingness to argue with more assertive peers. As a teenager, in his desire to live up to the expectations of those around him, even if they contradicted his own desires. Now, in adulthood, this trait had turned into an inability to stand up to his domineering wife. At 7:30 a.m., I gathered my few belongings. My suitcase remained at Ethan's house, but it didn't matter. There was nothing of value in it. The taxi I had ordered was due to arrive in half an hour to take me to the airport. Going down to the hotel lobby, I decided to call my old friend and lawyer, Thomas Renfield. Thomas and I have known each other for almost 40 years. He handled all my affairs, from buying real estate to setting up investment trusts. Thomas knew more about my finances than anyone else, including the late Caroline. I dialed his number, and he answered on the second ring. Eugene, Thomas sounded surprised. Aren't you in Tigard? I was, I replied curtly. I'm coming back today. Did something happen? You were supposed to stay there for at least another week. I took a deep breath and told him the whole story, from Abigail's cold reception to yesterday's humiliating expulsion. Thomas listened silently, only occasionally grunting at particularly dramatic moments. A beggar old man? He asked when I finished. Seriously? Did she really say that? Word for word, I confirmed, in front of the photographer, the reporter, and the entire film crew. Thomas whistled. And Ethan? What did your son do? Nothing. He just stood there and stared at the floor. There was a pause. I could hear Thomas drumming his fingers on the table, a habit he had when he was deep in thought. You know, Eugene, he finally said, in my practice, I've often encountered family conflicts, but I've rarely seen such ingratitude. It's not about gratitude, I replied. I never expected Ethan to be grateful for what I did for him. I expected respect, as a father, as a man, which you obviously didn't get, Thomas concluded. What are you going to do? I looked out the hall window. My taxi was already pulling up. I need to think. I'll come to Portland, rest for a day or two, then we'll talk. I need your advice and your services. Always at your service, Thomas replied. When are you arriving? At 3:30 p.m. if there are no delays. I'll meet you at the airport, he said firmly. Don't argue. You don't need to be alone right now. I wanted to object, to say that I could manage on my own, but suddenly I felt relieved at the thought of having someone nearby. Thank you, Thomas. That means a lot to me. After ending the conversation, I paid for the room and went out to the waiting taxi. The driver, a heavy-set middle-aged man with a good-natured face, helped me with my bag. To the airport, sir? He asked as we pulled away. Yes, please. Leaving Tigard? For long? Forever, I replied, looking out the window at the streets of a city that had never become home to me. Sensing my mood, the driver made no further attempt to strike up a conversation. We rode in silence, and I was grateful for it. The drive to the airport took about an hour. I checked in for my flight, went through security, and found myself in the waiting area. I still had an hour and a half before departure. I bought a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the planes take off and land. My thoughts returned to Ethan and Abigail. I wonder how their photo shoot went after I left. Were they able to pretend that nothing had happened? Did they smile for the camera while Abigail's words still echoed in the room? What now? Ethan will surely try to contact me, if not today, then tomorrow or in a week. He would apologize, explain his wife's behavior as stress, ask for understanding and forgiveness. And me? For the first time ever, I seriously considered that my relationship with my son might be irrevocably ruined. Not just put on hold or complicated, but destroyed beyond repair. This thought evoked a strange feeling, a mixture of deep sadness and unexpected relief. It was as if I had finally acknowledged the truth that I had long refused to see. My son was no longer the boy I knew and loved. He had become a different person, weak, spineless, living in the shadow of his ambitious wife. A person who allows his father to be humiliated and cannot find the strength to say a word in his defense. My flight was announced. I finished my coffee, threw away the cup, and headed for the boarding gate. On the plane, I asked for a window seat and, settling in comfortably, closed my eyes. I spent the flight in a daze. I woke up from turbulence, looked at the clouds outside the window, and fell asleep again. In this state between sleep and wakefulness, I suddenly realized clearly what I had to do. Reveal my role in Ocean Futures. Show Ethan and Abigail who the poor old man they so contemptuously threw out the door really is. Deprive Ethan of the promotion I had arranged for him. Let them learn the true price of their arrogance. This thought should have brought me a sense of vengeful satisfaction, but instead I felt only fatigue. Revenge had never been my style. Even now, insulted and rejected, I couldn't enjoy thoughts of retribution. But justice must prevail. Thomas was indeed waiting for me at the Portland airport. I spotted his tall figure from a distance. My friend was standing at the exit with a sign that said Hampton, as if I were an important person and not just an old man returning home after an unsuccessful trip. You look like crap, Thomas said instead of greeting me, shaking my hand. I feel like it, I grinned. We walked out to the parking lot, where a black Mercedes was waiting for us. Thomas always had a soft spot for German cars. We hardly spoke on the way home. Thomas concentrated on driving, and I looked out the window at the familiar streets of Portland. After the unfamiliar and cold Tigard, the city seemed especially familiar and cozy. My house greeted me with silence and dust. I had been away for more than a week, and it showed. Thomas helped carry the bags inside and went to the kitchen, where he immediately started making coffee. He knew my house almost as well as his own. So, he said when we settled into the living room with cups of strong coffee, what exactly are you going to do? I was silent, gathering my thoughts. I want them to know, I finally said. I want them to understand who they've insulted and driven away. Reveal your role in Ocean Futures? Thomas clarified. Yes, and cancel Ethan's promotion. Thomas nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting those words. It's possible. You control the company through a series of trusts and holding companies. One call to Paul Willis is all it takes to cancel the promotion. Exactly, I said, taking a sip of coffee and feeling the hot liquid warm me from the inside. I already thought about it on the plane. This isn't revenge, Thomas. It's restoring balance. I understand. Thomas looked at me intently. But are you sure you want this? Such a move could permanently destroy your relationship with your son. Is there anything left to destroy? I smiled bitterly. Yesterday he chose sides, and it wasn't mine. Thomas sighed and put his cup down on the table. Eugene, I've known you for almost 40 years. You've never been a vengeful man. Even when that partner tried to push you out of the consulting firm, you just left with dignity, without trying to hurt him. That's different, I objected. That was about business. This is about my family, about my son. Exactly, Thomas leaned forward. About your son. As disappointing as his behavior may be, he's still your son. Are you sure you're ready to burn that bridge? I stood up and walked over to the fireplace, where framed photographs stood. Ethan as a child, Ethan as a teenager, Ethan with Caroline at prom, Ethan on his wedding day with Abigail. A life story captured in photographs. I didn't burn this bridge, I said quietly. It's already burning. I just want them to know that their actions have consequences. Thomas also got up and stood next to me. Then let's do this right. He put his hand on my shoulder. No unnecessary emotions, no drama. Clean, legally flawless. I nodded, feeling a strange calmness. Where do we start? First, I'll prepare the documents to change the management structure of the trust. Thomas returned to his cup. Right now, you're acting through intermediaries, but you can officially become the controlling shareholder. It'll take 2 or 3 days. What about Ethan's promotion? That's easier. One call to Paul, and that's it. But I would recommend waiting until the paperwork is done. That way you'll have all the cards in your hand. I agreed. Thomas was right. We needed to proceed methodically without rushing. What about Ethan? I asked. What if he tries to contact me? That's your decision, Thomas shrugged. You can talk to him or ignore his calls. But I would advise you not to reveal your plans until everything is ready. I nodded. It sounded reasonable. We talked for about another hour, discussing the details of the upcoming actions. Thomas promised to prepare all the necessary documents and keep me informed. As he left, I felt immense gratitude for his support and understanding. Left alone, I walked around the house, checking that everything was in order. The bed in the bedroom was neatly made. The housekeeper came on Thursdays. On the bedside table was a photo of Caroline, her favorite picture, taken during our trip to Tuscany 10 years ago. What would you say, dear? I asked, looking at her smiling face. Am I doing the right thing? Of course, there was no answer. But I knew Caroline better than anyone else. She always valued honesty and fairness above family ties. To love is not to indulge, she often said when it came to Ethan's upbringing. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully, without dreams. In the morning, after breakfast and a cup of coffee, I called Paul Willis. Eugene? He sounded surprised. I heard you left Tigard. Did something happen? Yes, Paul, I replied, and I need your help. I briefly explained the situation without going into emotional details. Just the facts. My intention to officially assume the rights of a controlling shareholder and cancel Ethan's promotion. Are you sure? Paul was clearly shocked. This is a serious step. Absolutely sure. My voice did not waver. Thomas will prepare all the necessary documents in the next few days. In the meantime, I ask you to suspend Ethan's promotion process. Okay, Paul replied after a pause. I'll say that the board of directors has decided to review the candidates. That will give us time without any unnecessary questions. Thank you, my friend. After talking to Paul, I felt an unprecedented lightness. It was as if the weight I had been carrying for years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I no longer tried to be the perfect father, nor did I strive to earn my son's love and respect. I was just myself, a person who deserves respect for who he is, not because of family ties. During the day, I tidied up the house, sorted through the mail that had piled up during my absence, and made a few calls to old friends. None of them knew about the disaster in Tigard, and I didn't share the story with them. Why bother others with my problems? In the evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, watching the sunset. The phone rang. Ethan's name lit up on the screen. I stared at the flashing display but didn't rush to answer. What could I say to my son now? What did I want to hear from him? After the fifth call, the phone went silent. A minute later, a message arrived. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I put the phone down without answering. The time for talking was over. Now that was the time for action. The next morning, I met with Thomas at his office. He had prepared the preliminary documents that needed to be reviewed and signed. We spent several hours discussing the details and making the necessary adjustments. "Everything will be ready by Friday," Thomas said when we were done. "Then you can officially announce your status in the company." "Great," I said, signing the last document. "What about Ethan? Should he be the first to know?" Thomas thought for a moment. "It depends on what you want to achieve. If the goal is maximum impact, then let him find out officially, along with everyone else. If you want to give him a chance to understand his mistake privately, tell him personally." I remembered Ethan's silence when Abigail insulted me, his inability to take my side, to defend his father. Let him find out officially, I decided, like everyone else. When I got home, I felt strangely empty. It was as if an important stage of my life had come to an end, and uncertainty lay ahead. But there was something encouraging about that uncertainty, a new chapter that I would write myself, without regard for the expectations of others. In the evening, I was sitting on the porch again when the phone rang. This time it wasn't Ethan, but Paul Willis. "Eugene," his voice sounded alarmed. "We have a problem." "What happened?" "Ethan came to my office today. He asked why his promotion was being delayed. I told him what we had agreed, that the board was reviewing the candidates. But he was insistent." "How insistent?" I asked, feeling my heart sink. "He hinted that his wife knows a member of the board of directors who allegedly confirmed that the promotion has already been approved. Eugene, he threatened to raise the issue at the next shareholders meeting if the decision wasn't announced in the next few days." I closed my eyes. Here we go. Abigail had clearly used her connections, or what she thought were connections. She and Ethan weren't just waiting for the promotion, they were demanding it, considering it their right. "Paul," my voice was firm, "the documents will be ready by Friday, but if necessary, we can speed up the process. I don't want you to be in an awkward situation because of me." "No, it's fine," Paul assured me. "I can handle it. I just wanted you to know." After that conversation, my decision was only reinforced. That evening, I called Thomas and asked him to speed up the process of preparing the documents. He promised to do everything possible. Over the next 2 days, I was completely immersed in the paperwork associated with my official entry into the rights of the controlling shareholder of Ocean Futures. I signed documents, sent faxes, and consulted with Thomas on every legal detail. Ethan called every day, but I didn't answer. Once he even left a voicemail. "Dad, I know you're angry and I understand, but we need to talk. Abigail regrets what she said. She was out of her mind with stress. Please call me back." I deleted the message without listening to the end. It was too late for apologies, too late for conversations. The decision had been made. By Thursday, all the documents were ready. Thomas brought them to my house himself, and we checked every page, every signature together. "Tomorrow morning, I'll submit these documents to the appropriate authorities," Thomas said. "By noon, everything will be official. Are you ready?" I looked at the photo of Caroline on the table. It seemed to me that she was nodding approvingly. "I'm ready," I replied firmly, "more than ready." Friday morning was clear and sunny. Days like this are especially appreciated by Portland residents. I woke up with the first rays of the sun, feeling unusually cheerful despite my restless sleep. Today was the day of truth. After showering and eating breakfast, I called Thomas to make sure everything was going according to plan. "Good morning, Eugene." My friend's voice sounded businesslike. "I was just about to call you. The documents have been submitted. We're just waiting for official confirmation. When can I expect news?" "Everything will be finalized by noon. Then I'll send a notification to the Ocean Futures Board of Directors. They'll receive it around 2 o'clock. "What about Ethan?" "He'll find out at the same time as everyone else, just as you wanted. Unless, of course, you've changed your mind." I paused for a second. Wasn't it too cruel to let my son find out the truth this way? Maybe I should warn him, give him a chance to prepare for the blow? But then I remembered Abigail's words. Poor old man, pathetic pensioner, and Ethan's silent agreement with these insults. "No," I replied firmly. "Let everything be as we agreed. He made his choice. Now let him live with the consequences." "All right." Thomas didn't argue. "I'll keep you posted. And you, Try not to worry too much. Keep yourself busy, distract yourself. I snorted. Easy to say, distract yourself. How could I not think about the fact that in a few hours, my son's world would be turned upside down? After talking to Thomas, I decided to follow his advice and really get busy. I went out to the garden, where the rose bushes, Caroline's favorite flowers, had long needed pruning. She always took care of them herself, and after her death, the garden began to run wild. I tried to keep it tidy, but gardening was never my strong suit. Working with plants turned out to be surprisingly therapeutic. I trimmed the dry branches, loosened the soil, and watered the plants. Time flew by unnoticed. When I finally straightened up, stretching my stiff back, it was almost noon. Returning to the house, I took a shower, changed my clothes, and sat down in the chair by the phone, waiting for Thomas's call. I imagined how events were unfolding at the Ocean Futures office right now. The secretary bringing Paul Willis a package of documents, Paul calling an emergency board meeting, them discussing the unexpected news. The phone rang at exactly 2:15 p.m. It was Thomas. "It's done," he said without preamble. "The board of directors has been notified. You are now officially the controlling shareholder of Ocean Futures, acting directly without intermediaries." I took a deep breath. It was done. How did they react? According to Paul, they were surprised, but not greatly. Many had guessed that there was a real investor behind the trusts and holding companies. They just didn't know who it was. What about Ethan? Did they tell him? Yes, Paul personally called him into his office about half an hour ago. Officially, it was to discuss his promotion. I imagined the scene. Ethan, confident that he would finally get his long-awaited promotion, walks into the director's office and learns that all these years he has been working for a company that actually belongs to his father, the same poor old man whom his wife had so contemptuously thrown out the door. "What now?" I asked, feeling a strange emptiness instead of the expected triumph. "Now you can do whatever you think is best with the company," Thomas replied. "That includes canceling Ethan's promotion or even firing him. Firing your own son? No, I wasn't ready to go that far. It's one thing to cancel an undeserved promotion, but quite another to deprive a person of their livelihood." "We'll see," I replied evasively. "Let's let the situation develop naturally." "Reasonable," Thomas approved. "And one more thing, Eugene. Be prepared for Ethan to try to contact you. He may even come in person." "I know. Don't worry, I can handle it." After talking to Thomas, I felt a strange emptiness. What I had been working toward for the last few days had come to pass, but I felt no joy, only a quiet confidence that I had done the right thing. I waited all day for Ethan's call, but the phone remained silent. In the evening, I had dinner alone, drank a glass of whiskey, and went to bed earlier than usual, feeling emotionally drained. I woke up to the insistent ringing of the doorbell. The clock showed 6:30 a.m., too early for visitors. Throwing on my robe, I went downstairs and looked through the peephole. Ethan was standing on the doorstep. He looked haggard, with red eyes from lack of sleep, wearing a rumpled suit. It seemed he had come straight from the office without stopping at home. Abigail stood nervously shifting from foot to foot beside him, her usually impeccable hairstyle looking messy, her face completely free of makeup. I opened the door but remained standing in the doorway, not inviting them in. "Dad!" Ethan's voice sounded hoarse, as if he had been shouting or crying for a long time. "We need to talk." "Now?" I glanced pointedly at my watch. "It's 6:30 in the morning." "We drove all night," Ethan said, running a hand over his face. "Please let us in." I hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. They entered the hallway, and I noticed Abigail looking around nervously, as if assessing the situation. Her eyes showed distrust. Apparently, she had expected to see the home of a poor old man rather than a well-kept house in a prestigious neighborhood. "Come into the kitchen," I said. "I'll make some coffee." They followed me silently. In the kitchen, Ethan and Abigail sat down at the table, and I deliberately took my time making coffee. Let them get nervous. Think about what they want to say. When the coffee was ready, I poured it into cups and sat down opposite them. "So," I said calmly, "what did you want to talk about?" Ethan and Abigail exchanged glances. It was obvious that they had discussed how to conduct this conversation beforehand. "Dad," Ethan began, "yesterday we found out, that you own Ocean Futures." That all these years you've been the main investor in the company where I work. I nodded silently, sipping my coffee. Why didn't you tell me? His voice sounded hurt. Why did you hide it? Why should I have told you? I shrugged. You always wanted to achieve everything yourself. Isn't that right? I just created the conditions in which you could demonstrate your abilities. Created the conditions? Abigail interrupted, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. You controlled his every move in the company. All his achievements, all his promotions. It was your doing. No, I shook my head. I never interfered in his career. Until recently. Until recently? Ethan asked. You mean your last promotion, I confirmed. Yes, I asked Paul to consider your candidacy. But that was my first and only intervention. Ethan paled. So I didn't deserve the promotion? I was chosen only because of you? No, I looked my son in the eyes. Paul confirmed that your analytical reports are truly brilliant. You earned this promotion through your hard work. I just expedited the process. And now they've canceled it, Ethan said bitterly. Paul said the board of directors has reversed its decision. Yes, I didn't deny it. They canceled it. Why? Ethan slammed his fist on the table, spilling coffee. To get back at me? For what? For what? I raised my eyebrows. Seriously, Ethan? You really don't understand? There was a heavy pause. Abigail stared at the floor, nervously twisting a napkin. Ethan was breathing heavily, clearly trying to control his emotions. I know Abby said some awful things, he finally said. And it's my fault I didn't stop her. Didn't stand up for you. I'm really sorry, Dad. I mean it. Sorry? I smiled bitterly. So sorry you let your wife kick me out of the house? So sorry you didn't call that night to make sure I was okay? So sorry that you didn't even try to find me until you found out who I really was? I called, Ethan protested. Many times. You didn't answer. Only after a day, I replied coldly, when your conscience finally woke up. Or when Abigail decided it would be a good idea to patch things up with your old man, who, as it turns out, isn't so poor after all. Abigail flinched but remained silent, studying her hands. Eugene, she finally looked up. I want to apologize for what I said. It was awful, unforgivable. I was under a lot of stress because of the photo shoot, but that's no excuse. You're right, it's no excuse, I agreed. But it's not even about the words, Abigail. It's about the attitude behind them. You didn't just say I was a poor old man. You believed it. And it was evident in every look you gave me, every gesture you made from the moment I walked into your house. She lowered her eyes, unable to find a response. Dad, Ethan tried to take the initiative. We made a terrible mistake. We're ready to make amends. Just tell us what to do. Make amends? I shook my head. This isn't a matter of amends, Ethan. It's a matter of consequences. You made a choice. Now live with it. What? What does that mean? His voice faltered. Are you going to fire me? I looked closely at my son. Did he really think I was capable of that? That a father would deprive his own child of a livelihood out of revenge? No, I replied firmly. I'm not going to fire you. You're a talented analyst, and the company needs specialists like you. I could see from Ethan's face that a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Thank you, Dad, he breathed. I didn't know what to think after yesterday. But, I interrupted him, your promotion has been canceled, and not because I want to punish you. It's because you're not ready for this position yet. Not ready? Ethan asked incredulously. But all my reports, all my projects, it's not about professional skill, I explained. It's about personal qualities. Deputy director isn't just a high-paying position. It's a big responsibility. It's leadership. It's the ability to make difficult decisions and stand your ground. Ethan was silent, but I could see from his face that my words had hit home. What about our house? Abigail asked suddenly. We have a mortgage, and we were hoping that with Ethan's promotion, we would be able to manage the payments more easily. Your house is your problem, I replied, trying to sound calm. I'm not going to interfere in your financial affairs, in a good way or a bad way. Abigail looked dejected. It was obvious that she was hoping for financial help, perhaps even expecting me to pay off their mortgage or offer them money. Our conversation continued for about another hour. Ethan tried to justify himself, to explain his behavior, while Abigail remained mostly silent, occasionally offering insincere apologies. Finally, I said I needed time to think things over. "Can we stay with you?" Ethan asked timidly. "At least for the night? We drove all night." "No," I replied firmly. "Find a hotel. There are plenty of them in Portland." As they left, I noticed Abigail take one last appraising look at the house. Her eyes showed something between envy and disappointment. Apparently, she still couldn't believe that a poor old man lived in such a house and controlled the company where her husband worked. Back at the house, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, finishing my cold coffee. The phone rang. It was Thomas. "How are you?" he asked. "Did Ethan find you?" "Yes, they came," I sighed. "They just left." "How did it go?" "As expected. Shock, disbelief, then apologies." Abigail tried to feign remorse, but I saw right through her. She's not ashamed of what she said. She's ashamed that she said it to someone who turned out to be influential and wealthy. "And Ethan?" "He's genuinely remorseful," I paused, "but not for not standing up for me, for losing his promotion." "That's harsh," Thomas remarked, "but perhaps fair." Over the next week, Ethan tried to contact me almost every day. He called my home phone, my cell phone, and sent me messages. I saw the notifications, but I didn't respond. I needed time to sort out my own feelings. From Paul Willis that after returning to Thai Guard, the atmosphere around Ethan had changed. Colleagues who had previously viewed him as a rising star in the company were now whispering behind his back. Some believed that all his achievements were the result of his influential father's connections, while others feared that he might use his position to harm them. All his past successes were now in question. "He's holding on, but it's clearly not easy for him," Paul said in one of our phone conversations. Abigail, well, let's just say she's not the most supportive. She's already come to my office twice to try to convince me to give Ethan his promotion back. "And what did you say to her?" I asked, surprised by her persistence. "That the decision was made by the board of directors and cannot be reversed?" Paul chuckled. "She didn't appreciate that. She said she would go directly to you as the controlling shareholder." "Let her," I smiled. "Let's see if the poor old people will respond to her." By the end of the second week after the truth about my role in the company was revealed, Ethan sent me an email. It was short and restrained. "Dad, I understand that you don't want to talk to me right now, and I respect your decision. I just want you to know that everything has changed at the office. People look at me differently. No one believes that I deserve my position. Today during a meeting, my report, which has always been considered exemplary, was harshly criticized. I feel like I'm losing everything I've built. And the worst part is, I can't blame them. I doubt myself. Was I really good, or have you been supporting me behind the scenes all this time?" Abigail is hysterical. She's afraid we'll lose our home, our status, everything we've worked for. "I'm not asking for your help. I just wanted you to know what's going on. Ethan." I read the letter several times, trying to read between the lines what Ethan didn't dare say directly. Regret? Self-flagellation? A hidden request for help? I didn't reply to the letter, nor did I reply to the two that followed, arriving a few days apart. Each one was more desperate than the last. In the last one, Ethan admitted that his marriage to Abigail was falling apart, that she blamed him for all their problems, that their financial situation was getting worse every day. "The bank refused to refinance our mortgage," he wrote. "They found out that my promotion was canceled and decided that we were too risky as clients. We're trying to sell the house, but the market isn't great right now. Abigail can't come to terms with it. She thinks I should convince you to help us. I told her I wouldn't do that, and she hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. Dad, I don't know what to do." Every time I received a letter like this, I struggled with the urge to respond, to help, to support him. After all, Ethan is my only son. But then I remembered his silent acceptance of Abigail's insults, his inability to stand up for me, and my resolve returned. Let him learn to live with the consequences of his decisions. Let him understand what it means to be a man, not a weak-willed puppet in the hands of an ambitious wife. Maybe then he would truly be ready for the position from which I had removed him. Meanwhile, all of Ethan's attempts to contact me went unanswered. It's amazing how quickly time flies when you live a measured life. A whole year had passed since the day I revealed my true role in Ocean Futures and changed my son's destiny. 365 days, 4 seasons. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall, and winter came again. Nature had completed a full cycle, and with it, I had changed. At 75 years old, I suddenly found myself enjoying life more than ever. Perhaps the reason was that I was free from false expectations. I no longer tried to be the perfect father, nor did I strive to live up to other people's ideas of what an elderly person should be like. I just lived, on my own terms, following my own rules. My house in Portland, which once seemed too big and empty after Caroline's death, has now become a real refuge. I completely renovated the interior, not out of vanity, but to get rid of the ghosts of the past. Ethan's old photographs were moved to boxes in the attic. They were replaced by landscapes and still lifes by local artists, whose works I bought at weekly exhibitions. Gardening, which I took up more out of boredom, turned into a real passion. The rose garden, once Caroline's favorite project, now flourished under my unexpectedly skilled guidance. The local gardening club even invited me to give a talk on growing rare varieties of roses in the Pacific Northwest climate. But the biggest change was the expansion of my social circle. I used to be a reclusive person who preferred the company of my wife to that of strangers. Now my house was regularly filled with voices. I hosted weekly poker nights for friends, Saturday breakfasts with neighbors, and sometimes even small musical evenings with a local string quartet. Thomas, my loyal friend and lawyer, often joked that I had become a retired socialite. Perhaps there was some truth to this joke. I really enjoyed spending time with people who appreciated me for who I was, not for my money or status. Oh, money. Having revealed my role in Ocean Futures, I stopped hiding other aspects of my financial situation. Now my friends knew that I was not just a well-off retiree, but a man whose fortune was in the 8 figures. It didn't change our relationship. True friendship doesn't depend on the size of your bank account. As for Ethan, for the first few months after our breakup, I received regular letters from him, first by email, then by post, when it became clear that I wasn't responding to his emails. He wrote about his problems at work, the growing tension in his relationship with Abigail, and his financial difficulties. Over time, the letters became less frequent, and their tone changed. Fewer complaints, more reflection. It seemed that Ethan was finally growing up. I learned about my son's professional life from Paul Willis. His position in the company remained precarious. When his colleagues found out about his connection to me, they divided into two camps. Some openly curried favor with him, hoping to gain access to an influential shareholder, while others shunned him, considering his career to be the result of nepotism. Ethan himself worked like a man possessed, trying to prove his professional worth. "He's really talented," Paul told me during one of our monthly lunches. His latest forecast report on the titanium market saved the company millions. But you know how it is. Once you've been labeled the boss's son, it's very hard to shake that label. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride in my son's professional success and regret that our relationship was ruined, perhaps irrevocably. On the last day of winter, exactly 1 year and 3 days after our last conversation, I received another letter from Ethan. Not an email, but a real, paper letter in a thick, cream-colored envelope. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope, still angular, with a characteristic slant to the right. I didn't rush to open the letter. I made myself a cup of strong tea, settled into my favorite chair by the fireplace, and only then tore open the envelope. "Dear Dad," the letter began, and those simple words brought a lump to my throat. "It's been a year since we last saw each other, a whole year that has turned my whole life upside down. I thought long and hard about whether to write to you again, considering that you never replied to any of my previous letters. But I have to tell you about the changes that have taken place. 2 weeks ago, I was fired from Ocean Futures. The official reason was downsizing, but we both know that's not true. I was the only one in our department who was laid off. Perhaps it was revenge for my failure to provide access to you to those who were counting on it. Or, more likely, it was simply a convenient way to get rid of an inconvenient employee with a tarnished reputation. It's funny, but I don't feel bitter or resentful. Rather, I feel relieved. The last year at the company was like slow torture. Every day I felt the stares of my colleagues, heard the whispers behind my back. Every success was attributed to your influence. Every mistake was met with poorly concealed satisfaction. Abigail and I are no longer together. Our marriage did not withstand the test of hardship. When it became clear that my position in the company was shaky, and with it our financial well-being, she quickly found a way out. 4 months ago, I discovered that she was seeing Richard Clayton, the very colleague you saw in the office on the day of your visit. Apparently, their affair had begun long before that. I didn't make a scene. I just packed my things and moved out. Our house in Tigard was already up for sale anyway. We couldn't keep up with the mortgage. The bank agreed to a discount deal to avoid foreclosure, but even so, we still owed a significant amount. Now I live in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of Tigard and am looking for a job. The economic situation is not the most favorable, and my resume with experience in only one company does not impress recruiters. On top of that, there are debts to pay off. Dad, I never thought I'd say this, but you were right. Right about everything. I really wasn't ready for the position I was applying for. Not because of a lack of professional skills, but because of my personal qualities. I let Abigail make all the decisions for me, went with the flow, avoided confrontation even when I should have stood up for what was really important. For example, respect for my own father. I'm not asking you to forgive me, and I didn't write this letter to beg for financial help, although, to be honest, I could really use it right now. I just wanted you to know that I understand my mistakes, and I'm working on myself. If you ever want to get in touch with me, here is my new address and phone number. I will always be happy to hear your voice. With love, your son, Ethan. I reread the letter several times, trying to understand what I was feeling. Bitterness that my son had lost his job and his marriage, satisfaction that my lesson had been learned, doubt about the sincerity of his remorse, or perhaps all of the above. Putting the letter aside, I walked over to the window. Rare snowflakes swirled outside. Snow was a rarity in Portland at the end of winter. Thoughts also swirled in my head, refusing to form a clear picture. Ethan had lost everything. His job, his home, his wife. He was in debt and living in a rented apartment on the outskirts of town. And judging by the tone of his letter, he had truly realized his mistakes. But was that enough to restore our relationship? I thought about it all day, considering my options for a response. I could offer financial assistance, help him find a new job, even invite him to stay with me until he got back on his feet. But something held me back. Not resentment, no. Rather, the understanding that some lessons must be learned completely without leniency. By evening, I had made my decision. I sat down at my desk and took out a sheet of paper. If Ethan had written to me by hand, I would respond in kind. Ethan, I began, deliberately avoiding "dear son" or anything like that. I received your letter and read it carefully. I am sorry that your life has turned out this way. Losing your job and your marriage within a year is a difficult ordeal for anyone. However, I cannot say that I am surprised by this turn of events. Your marriage to Abigail was always built on shaky foundations, shared ambitions, and a desire for outward success, rather than deep feelings and mutual respect. As for your job, companies, like people, rarely forgive those who are caught between two stools. You write that you understand your mistakes and are working on yourself. That's commendable if it's true. But understanding should come not when you've lost everything, but much earlier, when you still have a choice. You also mention financial difficulties, although you say you're not asking for help. Let me be clear. I'm not going to pay your debts or solve your financial problems. Not because I am vindictive or cruel, but because this is your path, your lesson, and you must walk it yourself. Perhaps someday we will be able to communicate again as father and son. But not now. The memories of you standing silently while your wife called me a beggar are too fresh. I remember too clearly the look on your face when you kicked me out of your house, choosing peace with Abigail over respect for your father. I wish for you to find your own path, to become stronger, to learn to make decisions and take responsibility for them. Perhaps then, when you truly become a man and not a shadow of your wife, we can start over. Sincerely, Eugene Hampton. I reread what I had written. The letter came across as cold, even harsh. But that was my choice. Not to give false hope, not to promise forgiveness that was not yet in my heart. I sealed the letter in an envelope, wrote the address, and set it aside to mail tomorrow. After that, I called Thomas and asked him to come over. There was an important matter that required his professional involvement. Is it urgent? He asked, concern in his voice. No, but it's important, I replied. It's about my will. Thomas arrived an hour later with a briefcase full of documents. We settled into my office, and I explained that I wanted to revise my will. Is this related to Ethan? He asked directly, as befits an old friend. Yes, I didn't hide it. I received a letter from him today. He was fired from Ocean Futures, divorced from Abigail, and left homeless and in debt. Thomas whistled. Life has taught him a harsh lesson? Exactly, I nodded. And I don't want my wealth to devalue that lesson. You want to disinherit him? Thomas looked surprised. That's a radical decision, Eugene. He is your only son after all. Not completely disinherit him, I clarified, but significantly limit his inheritance. I want to pass on the bulk of my fortune to someone else. Who? My nephew Lawrence, my cousin's son from Seattle. Thomas thought for a moment, apparently trying to remember if I had ever mentioned this person before. I don't remember you talking about him before. We weren't close for most of our lives, I admitted. But for the last 2 years, Lawrence has been visiting me regularly, helping me with the house, taking me to doctors when I had that heart problem. He's the only relative who showed genuine concern after Caroline's death. What about Ethan? Ethan called a few times, sent flowers to the funeral, and went back to his life, I said with a bitter smile. He was too busy with his career and satisfying Abigail's ambitions. Thomas nodded, accepting my explanation. Okay, how do you want to distribute the assets? The controlling interest in Ocean Futures goes to Lawrence. He has an MBA and now runs a small but successful consulting firm in Seattle. I think he can handle it. The house in Portland goes to him too. What about Ethan? Enough money to start a new life, but not so much that he can live without working. Let's say $500,000, and the house in Aspen that Caroline and I bought for vacations. He can sell it if he wants. Thomas wrote down my wishes, then looked up. Are you sure, Eugene? This is a serious decision. Absolutely sure, I nodded. I've thought about this for a long time. The last year has shown me who really cares about me and who sees me as a source of profit or a burden. Thomas didn't argue. He took the standard forms for drawing up a will out of his briefcase, and we spent the next 2 hours discussing the details and wording. When the document was ready, I signed it in the presence of 2 witnesses, my neighbor Ellen, whom Thomas had thoughtfully invited to come with him, and my gardener James, who happened to be working in the yard. After Thomas left, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if I had closed an important chapter in my life and opened a new one. I felt no malice or vengeful satisfaction at the thought that Ethan might be shocked to learn of my decision after my death. Only a quiet confidence that I had done the right thing. That evening, I sat by the fireplace, sipping whiskey and watching the flames. Outside the window, snow was falling, covering my well-tended garden with a white blanket. I thought about the past year, the lessons it had taught me, the changes that had taken place in my life. By losing my son, I had found myself. Perhaps one day Ethan would indeed become someone with whom I could rebuild a relationship. But even if that didn't happen, I would be okay. At 75, I finally understood that happiness does not come from meeting other people's expectations, but from living in accordance with one's own principles. The next morning, I sent a letter to Ethan and called Lawrence to invite him over for the weekend. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, and I wanted to tell him about the roses I was planning to plant in the spring. Life went on, my life, on my terms.